Deuteronomy chapter 33 and verse 29. Happy art thou, O Israel, who is like unto thee, O people saved by Yahweh, the shield of thy help, and who is the sword of thy excellency. And thine enemies shall be found liars unto thee, and thou shalt tread upon their high places. Shalom, brothers and sisters. This is your brother Hawayala. I want to give all glory and praises to our Heavenly Father Yahweh. In the name of our Lord and Savior Yahawashi, grace and mercy be abound to the hopeful elect scattered throughout the four corners of the earth that are waiting on the second coming of our Lord and Savior Yahawashi HaMashiach, who will replace lies with the truth and will remove everything that sins and causes iniquity to be removed out of his sight. Wanted to go into this lesson concerning the whole rewritten history concerning our people and the lies that have been compounded for centuries to basically remove away our identity, to make us be forgotten among the world as a nation, and to basically keep our people in darkness. This actually is inspired by a conversation that I had with the brother Don Yala, just concerning information that is always being sent out via social media, or some of the things that we've been taught in schools concerning the place of our people, meaning our identity, what happened to us, who did what to us, and some of the things that have been said, even amongst different Israelite groups. You have a whole movement of people, although it's a smaller group of people. You have, but they're very outspoken, is like your Negro onlys. And many people, they use these things, this type of information that is used against us, the people, to kind of divide us and prevent us from knowing who we are and understanding where we're going. Because ultimately, if you don't understand history, you cannot understand the present, and you cannot basically properly have an idea of the future. Okay, so if they can confuse you about your history, you're going to always be lost. Right? That's why it says in the scripture, seek ye after the old paths. The Bible was written for our learning, so we can look back at what has happened to us, why it happened to us, and then we can be able to find out what the solution is. And the solution that we have been given was, faith in Yahawashi. Okay, and through that we get understanding of our relationship with the Most High, and we also get wisdom as well from the scriptures to understand everything that we need to know in order to inherit the kingdom. And we're also able to destroy these lies, pull down strongholds to free us, to free us completely from the shackles of this system, first spiritually and mentally, and then the physical freedom will come when Yahawashi arrives. Now I'm going to go into a few things. I like to use Wikipedia sometimes, not as a primary source of information, but sometimes just to kind of give you an overview of what we're talking about. It's also very good for definitions as well. So here, as you see, it says here, historical revisionism. Now, it says here, in historiography, historical revisionism is the reinterpretation of historical account. It usually involves challenging the orthodox, established, accepted, or traditional views held by professional scholars about a historical event or time span or phenomenon, introducing contrary evidence or reinterpreting the motivations and decisions of people involved. The revision of the historical record can reflect new discoveries of fact, evidence, interpretation, which then results in revised history. In dramatic cases, revisionism involves a reversal of older moral judgments. Okay, so orthodox, by the way, is something that's original, something that's established. It's the traditional way of things that were done or understood. Now, what has happened is you have, what Esau does, he likes to recreate history. We see this thing in the accounts. We see his attempt to do that in the book of Maccabees, where he basically drew his images in the Bible. Back in those ancient world scrolls, they would sometimes have depictions of some of these men that were around, the different prophets, the different men of war, the different kings, the different people that from our history. That would be part of our our understanding of history. And what Esau did is he tried to change the likeness of the images of the people to fit him. Okay, and that was the first time of historical revisionism that you can kind of see in the scriptures. Okay, and Esau is very much that type of person. Okay, this is his modus operandi. He loves to reinterpret history to fit his narrative. Now, one of the things that Edomites do is that they try and first establish the actual history. Okay, so in order to be an effective liar like Esau is, they have to first establish what is the correct history and write that down for their own knowledge. And then what they do is they go out and they teach the masses a totally different thing. Okay, and they develop this over time. Now, one of the reasons why they did that is because, one, you have a lot of Christian Edomites that were settling here, and they began to feel guilty about the persecution of the natives once they found out that they were the Israelites. And this kind of led them to do various lies, which we'll probably have time to go over. Some of the stuff is actually talked about in various videos. I will actually show you some of the videos and recommend y'all to watch if you want to get more information concerning the northern tribes. Now, another thing is you have something called historical negationism. Okay, so you have historical negationism, which is basically also called denial in its falsifications. So it says here, it is distortion of historical record. It should not be conflated with historical revisionism, a broader term that extends to newly evidenced, fairly reasoned academic reinterpretations of history. Now, what they mean by that is that historical revisionism, what they do is they use quote unquote evidence to basically say this is actually what happened. So historical revisionism is what you're basically being taught in the school system, okay, which is basically something like the Bering Strait theory, which we'll get into. Okay, now what they do is they get researchers, they get a whole bunch of scholars, they send out money, grants to these people. They go and do some quote unquote exploration, write down information, and then just come up with theories and say, hey, I believe that this is how this happened. And then if you get enough of a consensus in academia, you can then promote this as something that should be studied and that should be given and put in the minds of the people. And then this is where these people begin to believe this theory, which is not a fact. And that's how you do historical revisionism, by basically replacing what was the original orthodox or written understanding of the origins of the Native American Indians and of the people that settled, the natives that settled the Caribbean, North America, Central and South America. And now you can basically teach that instead. Okay. Now, historical negationism is actually negating history, negating, denying, rejecting. Okay, so it says, we'll just go ahead and read the rest of it. It says, fairly reasoned academic interpretations of history. In attempting to revise the past, illegitimate historical revisionism may use techniques inadmissible in improper historical discourse, such as presenting known forged documents as genuine, inventing ingenious but implausible reasons for distrusting genuine documents, attributing conclusions to books and sources that report the opposite, manipulating statistical theories to support the given point of view, and deliberately mistranslating text. Brothers and sisters, this is the reason why I did the whole thing with the translation versus interpretation. Okay, because this is all part of this whole thing, this whole, house of lies, and how they do it in the academic spaces. Now, as you see here, they use documents that they can sometimes forge, okay, later, to basically say this and that happened. Manipulate statistical theories to support the given point of view. Now, one of the things that Esau does is he creates extra timelines. He begins to say these far out years away is when X, Y, and Z happened. And the reason why Esau does that, because it's so far away that there's no written history. People don't understand that, historical writings is not even really that long. It's really about, 5,000 years, 5,000 to 6,000 years long of writing. The earliest sources of writing that you can really find are really out there in the Middle East, Mesopotamia. okay, which is the area where, Noah and his 3 sons settled. And then you had early works like Hammurabi's Code. You have things like, the Epic of Gilgamesh. These are things that went back in that time frame and era. And then you have like, the different books that came out of Egypt. You have the different writings that came out of, Elam. You have different writings that came out of, of course, the land of Canaan. Then you have different writings that came, of course, out of Israel during the times of, us leaving. The first historical written accounts that we had as a people came during the time of Moses. And that's when we begin to compile our own information concerning the history of, mankind, right? And the history of our people. And that's how we got the Bible. But when Esau puts these things in the far out range, which surpasses, written history or the original written histories that were there, now you can just make up anything. And that's one of the things that they do. They make up they manipulate time to basically, use it as a means of creating, revisionist history, or just completely negating or denying the actual history of things that happened. Now, we're going to go ahead and go into this real quick. This is the Bering Strait. Okay. Now, this is the Bering Strait. By the way, this right here is actually part of Russia, and this is Alaska on the right. Now, this particular Bering Strait is the subject of the controversy. Okay. You see here, this is Alaska for you brothers and sisters that know the map of the United States. And this is Russia. Okay. This landmass is part of Russia. Now, they're saying that back in the day that the native of the Americas traveled from Asia, East Asia, and basically went through a land bridge that doesn't exist and crossed over it. Now, it's going to be very interesting. We'll go into, what they say that time was. Now, Bering Strait, by the way, was named after Vitus Bering, who was a Danish explorer and serviceman of the Russian Empire. So actually a very good documentary on the history of Russia that I watched last month. And it had a part where it did bring up Vitus Bering and about how he explored those regions, on behalf of Russian Empire, and then basically claimed it as territory, including what was known as Alaska. And of course, later on, Alaska was eventually sold to the United States by the Russian Empire. And that's how the United States came up with make Alaska a state or a U.S. territory at the time, and then later, of course, became a state. And that's how it came to be. Now, when you go here, it says that the Bering Strait has been subject of scientific theory. Okay, theory is not fact. Okay, that humans migrated from Asia to North America across a land bridge known as the Beringia, when lower ocean levels, perhaps a result of glaciers locking up vast amounts of water, exposed a wide stretch of sea floor, both in the present strait and in the shallow sea north and south of it. So this is a theory that there was an ice bridge, essentially, that was made by glaciers that they crossed, that cannot be proven. Now, this is how they revise history, by making up a theory. And then this is what they present to you at school. When I was in the 5th grade, I was introduced to the Bering Strait theory by the elementary teacher when we're doing the history session in class. And then you get it reinforced in middle school and in high school. Now, I don't know for you younger brothers and sisters, from talking to some of y'all, some of y'all not even being introduced to like even slavery at this point, especially if you're really young, because they trying to remove that out of the history books, especially in Texas and Florida. And I know from having conversations with some younger Jakes, they don't even know the extent of what happened to our people over here. Like, they have no idea. Something that if you talk to, like an 8th grader, back in the 1995 or something like that, they'll know all that stuff. You know what I mean? But, we're in a weird times right now. And it's right now we're in a massive amounts of censorship where they're trying to basically, amalgamate things together and put people's struggles as if they were all one people. This is where you have the whole issue with intersectionalism, that's going on. And so we have a people that are confused, and this is where a lot of the fussing and fighting. This particular theory is in large partly used by, Negro only. It's used by detractors like, Vocab Malone, anybody who's set up to come up against this, to basically say, you're not, these people are not the people of the book. Okay. And that's what they use. Now, this right here deals with the settlement of the Americas. Okay. And it goes into the same thing, the whole theory. Now, if you look at this time, like I was saying, it says that they came via, North Asia, the Mammoth Steep, via the Beringia land bridge, which doesn't exist. Okay. It doesn't exist. But remember, it's a theory that there was a land bridge. Okay. Now, look what it says, which had formed between northeastern Siberia and western Alaska due to the lowering of sea levels during the last glacier maximum. Okay, so basically, essentially the last level of the ice age, 26 to 19,000 years ago. Now, if you brothers and sisters really believe in the Bible, you would know that man didn't even live 19,000 years ago. All right. So, and I'll actually have to do a separate lesson on, on timelines in the Bible, going from the beginning all the way to, the time we are in now, so you can get a better understanding of that. But I can tell you this, and this is something that is known, throughout most brothers that study this, that this is a farce, because the time frame wouldn't even match up with the scriptures. Okay, as far as the events that happened in the scriptures, going back to the garden, all the way through the flood, and then through, the whole history of Mesopotamia, the scattering of the different people groups, and then, the formation of the nation of Israel out of Egypt, and the settlement and the taking over the land of Canaan, and then the various empires that rose up from Assyria all the way up to, the Roman Empire, and then, of course, all the way up until, now. It just wouldn't match up historically. But this is what they use. They use these type of theories. They go back, they get with some people that deal with, that deal with anthropology, that deal with, the ancient times. They deal with like ancient history and they deal with evolution and pre-man and all this stuff. And then they use these things and they supplant them into history of our people as a cover-up. And we know it's a cover-up because we know what the original sources said concerning the natives of the Americas. So now this is actually right here from the government. Okay, this is from the nationalparkservices.gov. All right. And it says the history of the Bering land bridge theory. All right. So this is the belief that the land bridge was formed during the end of the Ice Age. And remember, there is no Ice Age. The Ice Age never existed. This is something that Esau made up to cover up the history of mankind, of the people, because his own history is the most embarrassing out of all peoples on the earth. Let's just get that straight. Being an Edomite is the worst nation to be on the planet, according to, history and according to prophecy and future prophecy. So they do everything, spend billions of dollars every year trying to cover up their history and trying to rewrite our history, rewrite everybody else's history that doesn't fit their narrative, because they are embarrassed. Okay, and they understand if they can hide this from us, that it's going to basically prevent us from reconnecting with the Most High. But the Most High is not a liar, and his word doesn't come out void, and he was going to give his people an opening of understanding in these last days. So as you see here, it says here, map of eastern Russian and Alaska with a light brown border depicting Beringia. So this light brown area is what they're saying Beringia would have been. Okay. And that's how the land bridge. This is the theory that they made. Remember, the land bridge didn't exist. Okay, so it says here, the continent of North America has been inhabited by humans for at least 16,500 years, which we debunked that, and we're going to debunk that, Lord willing, in another lesson. As early as the 1500s, early settlers and European thinkers were interested in discovering how humans had came to populate North and South America. One theory suggested the migration of Norsemen across Greenland into North America. Another theory proposed the island of Atlantis as the origin of human life in the New World. Yet another idea proposed that the inhabitants had generated out of mud. However, by the early 1800s, scientists and theorists began discussing the possibility of a land bridge that had spanned between Asia and North America thousands of years ago. The theory of a land bridge has fueled the migration of explorers and scientists for centuries. Okay, so you notice that by the early 1800s is when they began to develop this. And it makes sense. And let me tell you why. Because if you understand, like the British Empire, I believe they abolished slavery around the 1830s. And around that same time, they also, I believe Mormonism came into being. This is where in the Book of Mormon, they actually admitted the natives were Israelites, but said that they were rejected because they basically did not fight, with the angels of the Lord in the war against Satan and his angels. So they were cursed or something like that. Crazy stuff, right? Because those people understood that the natives of the Americas were Israelites, and they felt guilty about it. So they had to drum up a lie as to why they were oppressing the Israelites in their own land. Okay. Yeah. Very heavy stuff. So this is where they had to come with a way to, how do we get out of this freaking, mess that we just made being Christians? Because remember, these Edomites, they read the Bible, they got into Christianity, they grabbed the book that wasn't theirs and believed in certain components of it, all the while merging, Edomite supremacy within it. And the whole, the whole theory of manifest destiny. Okay. So a lot of crazy stuff that happened during those times, and their minds were jacked up and they didn't know what to do. So what they decided to do was to create a lie. So let's go into what they said is the early theory, which is very interesting because, I'll point to other things as well for y'all to look at. It says the early theory of Fray Jose de Acosta in 1590. The Spanish missionary Fray Jose de Acosta produced the first written record to suggest a land bridge connecting Asia and to North America. So they're saying he's the early person, but that's very interesting considering that they never had at that point explored all the way in that region. Okay. In fact, the reason why I say this 1590 thing doesn't make sense, because let's go to this guy. Okay. So this guy is Vitus Bering. Vitus Bering is credited as the one who led the exploration to that area that is known as the Bering Strait. Okay. In fact, the Bering Strait and the Bering Sea was named after him. Now, look when he lived. Okay, so if he was an explorer, he was a cartographer, meaning he made maps. He was one that made the map of that region, okay, of that northeastern Russia / Alaska region. The area that connects the two sides was named after him, for crying out loud. You have the Bering Strait, Bering Sea, Bering Island, okay, the Bering Glacier. And then the Bering Land Bridge was named after his honor. Okay, so what are these people talking about? So they try and put these things in here just to throw you off. Okay, so it's funny. It's very funny that he could come up with a theory of a place that he doesn't even know how it looks like. Okay, so we just debunked that one right there through the spirit. Now, it goes into the exploration. Bering going there later. Okay, we're going to go ahead and skip that. And then we're going to go here. So the land bridge theory. It said the confirmation of a strait between Asia and North America fueled an interest in the possibility of a wide plain that might have connected the two continents. The key word is might. Okay, because if it did, it would have said a wide plain that did connect the two continents, but they said might, meaning it's a theory, meaning there, and the word might that they're using is really even wrong in and of itself, because it's been debunked and it's wrong. So this is really just a way to cast doubt in the eyes of the masses anyway. All right, so it says beginning in the early 1800s, American scientists and naturalists started investigating the archaeological sites on the east coast of the United States, slowly working their way towards the west coast. The findings of those forebears to modern archaeology suggested that people hadn't originated in North America, but had populated the continent from another place. However, from where and how they had yet to be discovered. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Why do you think they started from the east coast of the United States and worked westward? Because they understood that the original settlers of the North American Indians populated the east coast. In fact, they were more heavily populated in the eastern coast of America, from Florida all the way up to, the Northeast, the Massachusetts area, all right, Nassau Bay and all those areas, Connecticut, Delaware. There was a heavier population of North American Indians in those areas, and then throughout the plains regions, okay, than they were all in the West Coast, which shows that there was lesser of a migration westward, and the population of North American Indians was actually less as you went further west. Okay, they were more sprinkled out. Okay, and if you know anything about the western frontiers, a lot of those areas that were populated by buffaloes, those North American Indians would follow, the buffalo when they would move around to graze, because that was like their staple food. All right, so a lot of people have to understand, why were they going, if they believed that the settlement was from west to east, meaning that if you believed in the Bering Strait theory, let's go back to it, you would have to believe that they would have settled first in the areas of Canada, and then basically what was the state of Washington, Oregon, down to California, and then migrated westward eastward over time. But they clearly don't believe that, because that's the reason why they started from the east coast and went west. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and go right here. It says, however, from where and how they have yet been to be discovered, from 1890 to 1925, research, discussion, and inquiry about the peopling of the North America stalled because of inconclusive data. This is from the government now. They could not prove that the North American Indians came from Asia through a land bridge directly, and it stalled due to inconclusive data. Okay, that's where we're going into the whole historical revisionism and historical negationism, is compiling statistics and using that to go against the original and understood information that was already there. Okay, it says it wasn't until mid 1925 that scientists would finally restart the search for evidence of how people came to America. And this is where the Bering Strait theory began to be formulated. And that's now what is considered the consensus among pretty much the vast majority of Babylonians believe that theory. Okay. Even in fact, even the people who are descendants of the northern tribes, they began to believe that stuff too, because they're taught that in school. Just like you're taught about your origin just only being in Africa, and not having the origin that goes back to Noah, goes back to the land of the Chaldeans and Ur, and the later migration of Abraham into Mesopotamia, into the land of Canaan and into Egypt, and then the patriarchs being formed. You don't get that history when you're here in America. You're getting straight, hey, you came from Africa, were put on a boat, and this is your ancestors. And then now they're removing that. Now they're just basically trying to say you're just an American. And there's a lot of people that are actually force feeding that into our people, that's saying, hey, you're just a native of this land. You didn't come from anywhere. You don't have an origin story that's anywhere else but here. So now I'm not going to read this. This goes to David Hopkins, who was basically the leader of this theory. You can kind of go back and read it later. That's why I'd say, where is Beringia? Where is the land bridge? Where is Beringia, huh? Because it doesn't exist. Okay, it's like, where is Waldo? You can find him, but you can't find Beringia. All right, so I'm going to show y'all a map. This is the Bering Strait theory map, Russian Federation to Canada. Okay, and then this, of course, is Alaska right here. And this is basically what they're saying, that back in the Ice Age, which Ice Age never existed, that there was a land bridge that led to the migration patterns, which was a lie. So what are the videos that you can go into and watch to get, history of the original, the Orthodox history that these Edomites compiled themselves? Okay. So this is from a lesson. By the way, you can find it in the playlist 12 Tribes Breakdown. If you wanted to kind of go through and see some of these things, some of them are some very old lessons. The newer ones are the ones that were done in, the last couple of years that I use those historical books. One of those is The Origins of the American Indians by Lee E. Huddleston, who goes into the original sources. This can be found on our main page, Church of Yahweh Hashem Yahawashi. This is the 10 Northern Tribes and the Americas, Part 1. Then we also have the 10 Northern Tribes called the Jews of America, Part 2. Okay, this is a book. I go over that as well. Okay, and then another book, The Tribes of Israel, the True History. The True History. Okay, so not a revised history, not historical revisionism. Now, this is what an Edomite wrote: the true history of the North American Indians. Okay. Now, this one is also on the Church Yahweh Hashem Yahawashi page. Again, same playlist, 12 Tribes Breakdown, North American Indians, research written and proven to be Israelites. All right. And then another one, this is an older lesson I did back in 2015. For some reason, it is private. I do not know why, but I will go ahead and unlock it. And it will be open so you can catch it on the playlist. It says the natives of the Americas came from the Middle East. Now, this is from the National Geographic. Look at the title of the article. Great surprise. North Americans have Western Eurasian origins. And if you understand, Western Eurasia is basically, the Middle East. Okay, so we're talking about stretching into what is known as, I believe, is the steppe, which is over there going towards Central Asia, and then also all the way as far west as basically the land of Canaan, the Middle East. Okay, it says oldest human genome reveals less of an East Asian origin than thought. Wham, wham, wham. Yeah, so that's an L for these revisers of history. So I definitely highly recommend that you read this, get this particular, I don't even know if the article is even still available, but I do go over the article in this lesson. So we'll go ahead and go into this. This is 2nd Ezra chapter 13. We'll start at verse 39. And whereas thou sawest that he gathered another peaceable multitude unto him, those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king. So this is King Hoshea, who was the king of the northern tribes at the time of the captivity. It says, whom Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so they came into another land. It says, but they took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river, for the Most High then showed signs for them, and held still the flood till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and that same region is called Arsareth. Then dwelt they there until the latter time, now when they shall begin to come. All right, so let's go ahead and look at this. This is from the Jewish Encyclopedia. This says, the name Arsareth, land beyond the great river, far beyond from the habitation of man, in which the 10 tribes will dwell, observing the law of Moses until the time of restoration. It says, according to 2nd Ezra 13 and 45, Columbus, okay, the one who says told you, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Yes, that guy identified America with this land. So hopefully, this information was edifying to you, brothers and sisters. And again, I want to give all glory and praises to Yahweh Ba'asham Yahawashi. Grace and mercy be abound to the hopeful elect scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Shalom.